In today's podcast of Data for All, data in networking. Welcome to the Data for All podcast. I'm Charlie Apigian.
And I'm Charlie Yielding, where we want to empower you to think different with data. And on today's podcast, we were inspired to talk about networking.
Networking. Okay, so we're getting into the pipes and stuff of the internet and all of the fun stuff in there. You're giving me one of those looks because I must be correct.
We're not quite talking about that networking.
Oh.
Although data does travel through that network. We're talking about the networking interpersonal related type stuff.
The things that people in the data space are really good at.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. So we kind of got on this subject because we got a listener email.
We did,
and in that email, there's a few things that you're about to go over. But
yes.
The takeaway is, well, we should probably talk about networking because that's important in a lot of ways, shapes, or form, or a lot of ways, shapes, and forms. But why don't you just go into like what the email was about? Yeah,
and we get thousands of emails because
indeed.
Yes,
you should hit the button.
Oh, I'm sorry.
There we go.
Oh, I did it. We get thousands of emails.
All right,
that was
that's
good.
Enough.
We will not be slappy with our new little mixing board that we have here. But this one really spoke to us. Obviously, we both do the networking thing, I think, pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
And we work very hard at that.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're going to get into a lot of that. But I hear from a lot of parents concerned about their kids. And I think this is one that really tells the current story that's out there. And so we received from a mom that has two kids that have graduated from college. And she just was seeking advice and guidance to help with her son. Their daughter went through a normal college experience. In other words, before COVID, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And she was able to network and meet people and got an internship, actually worked and graduated in about 5 years and got a job. Mm-hmm. Her son was not as fortunate, according to the email, and he went to college through COVID. All of his classes were online, and he never got an opportunity to meet people. And of course, no internship, because a lot of that really kind of dried up. He, according to the mom, did very well in school and was cum laude at when he finished college, graduated in 2022 with a degree in computer science, and he still is not having any luck getting that first job. And, this is one where you want to just say, well, go meet people.
Yeah.
So, you know what? I've been doing this a while. I have been around the computer science, the more tech or data focused individual. Mm-hmm. You can't just say that. They need help.
Yeah,
they need help. And so, just to end it, he's a good learner. He is a hard worker. Do you have any suggestions, advice, etc.? Anything that it would be most appreciated. And so we saw that and we wrote back to the mom and said, hey, we think it's your fault. No, I'm just kidding. No. And actually we reached out and I want to talk to that student directly.
Yeah.
It sounds like somebody local. And I will hopefully be able to do that. But this is something that I feel like our target audience is going to be the person that's good at data, but it's also the one that is the up and coming. Mm-hmm. And if you're an up and coming in a data world, and we know that the human aspect of the job is going to be even more magnified with AI and other things coming out there, how can you set yourself apart? It's going to be your people skills.
Yeah.
And so, Charlie, how do we do that? How do we convey this to folks? You literally had like a playbook.
Yeah. So one of the things that we're sharing this year that we haven't done before is we're both elite mentors.
Yep.
And the elite program is something that's hosted by the NTC that teaches the soft skill sets to folks who have the hard skill sets. Yeah. So good individual contributors, whether they be coders, data scientists, project managers, like whatever it is, they're good with like getting things done themselves. Yeah. And then what people oftentimes figure out is when they go over to the people side of things that that their job is basically different now. It's not what it was. It's no longer computers. Now it's emotions and all this other type of stuff. And so that in and of itself isn't necessarily networking, but getting into a workplace and getting to know the people around you is networking.
Yeah.
Going into a new environment, like say, I play pickleball or whatever. And so if I'm going to a pickleball meetup, that's networking.
Pickleball meetup.
Yeah.
I should hit the rim shot for that one too. No, I'm just kidding.
Hey, we're getting pretty popular these days.
Yeah, I know.
But the networking isn't just for data folks, and it's not just for work. Like you can network easily in your personal life. If you've got something you want to do, networking helps. It's a facilitator. The easiest way to think of it is if you've heard the adage, like opportunity only knocks once. Well, networking allows you to be the person who's knocking, and you've got multiple doors to knock on to potentially create some opportunity. And so if you think about it, that's how we got started with this podcast.
Absolutely.
It's all networking. I met you through a committee that we mutually work on, and then at an event, which is the NTC Awards from last year. From 2022.
Yes.
Yeah.
So almost 2 years ago.
Almost 2 years ago. And then through a conversation we had at a networking event, we decided like, hey, this is something we're going to pursue.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, a lot of things that'll help somebody will be the one-on-one conversations they have with people a lot of times. But how do you get to that?
That's a good question. And so for the context of this conversation, we're going to be using it. We're going to be using this email as like the focal point. So so we're 23, 24, 25-ish, no network to speak of, and we're looking for a job.
Yep.
And so in this context, like what in the world do I begin to do? And so luckily for you, the listener, I have a framework. And so it's just like the personal process framework before. This isn't exactly how you do things, but this is definitely a way to do things, and then you can adapt it to your own needs.
Can I ask why you have a framework?
Because a part of the teaching the elite group is teaching them how to network. Yeah. So how to work through a room in a cocktail party or any kind of networking event or social event and whatnot, and then in the workforce, it's how to network with your peers, how to network with your managers, how to make sure you're talking to as many people as possible, so you have the clearest picture possible as far as like where the company's going and what needs to be done and all this other kind of stuff. And it helps you really manage up, if you've ever heard that term before. And so all of that is proactive networking at its base form.
Okay, so how do we get started here? So I think the approach we're going to take today is I don't know your framework. I am somebody that I feel has over the years gotten pretty good at networking, but I would not say I was great at it in the beginning.
Right.
I've had to work really hard, and now it becomes pretty natural to me. But so I don't have a framework for me personally. And so I'm really excited to see, this and maybe, so help get us started.
So you do what you do.
I do what I do.
And I do what I do, but I put it in order so I can teach it to other people.
Yes. And I just do what I do, I guess.
Yeah.
And so
you are very good at it. And so, so there's going to be some entry level stuff in here that you do just by default. And then you need to come in at certain points and just say, and then when you get to this level, then you can do these other things.
Sounds good. All right, get us started.
Okay, so we're a student looking for a job. So where do we even begin?
Okay, you got to show up somewhere.
Yeah.
Okay.
You got to have some people to talk to. And so I recommend like deciding for yourself that you're going to proactively network, meaning you're going to put yourself in positions that you're not comfortable with in order to get better at those things, in order to facilitate what it is that you want to do. And so in this case, it's get a job. Yeah.
And let's frame it, the 25-year-old again. A lot of times they've taken online classes. They haven't practiced being around their peers even. If they do have a job, it could be remote or 2 days a week in the office. So they're losing that practice as well. So this is somebody that a lot of times we'll just be at home, and I know I'll share some stories of a lot of the folks I'm seeing these days at like meetups and stuff. But anyways, so that's the kind of person we're dealing with.
Yeah.
It's not the same as 10 years ago. So yeah, okay, go ahead, get started. How do you pick an event?
Well, so you've got high value events, and then you've just got practice events.
Okay.
And so I like to start with practice events. And
Gotcha.
so what I'll do is like when I'm taking mentees through it or coworkers through it, because I teach coworkers how to network as well. We'll go to an innocuous event that doesn't have any kind of like special importance to either one of us. And then what we'll do is we'll go with a couple of goals. So when you're going to a networking event, once you've decided where to go, like come up with goals for yourself. So one of the things that I give somebody at a brand new networking event is meet 2 people and find out 2 facts about those people. And that's it. And from that, you can build every time you go to one of these things to the point to where you'll start to get to know people and things like that. But have some goals for yourself and go to these like practice events. And, whether it be like a coffee meetup in the morning or like some sort of lunch and learn or like a happy hour like the NTC puts on Nash Cocktail. Yeah. Like that's just an event that you can go to and just meet people.
Does it have to be professionally driven? In other words, if you want to get into the tech world, does the practice need to be a tech related event?
No. Okay. No, the practice can be anything because you're literally just getting your reps in. So you mentioned it before, like so we talk a lot, you and I do.
Yes.
And so we're practiced with our articulation. One of the things that I learned during the pandemic is you can lose the articulation over time if you don't use it. And so getting your practice reps in is just anywhere, anytime, because you never know who you're going to meet.
Yeah.
Just the act of meeting people needs to become something that you're not just interested in, but excited about. And that comes over time and with reps. And so it's the same way, the same kind of idea as talking in front of a group of people. Like if you're not good at it at the beginning, the only way to get better at it is to do it.
That's right. And with a lot of practice comes confidence. With confidence, you becomes more natural and you may actually like it over time. Trust me, in the beginning, it can be hard. I think, you see that a lot, especially with the people that we're involved with, remember, I'm with tech coders and you'll ask them a question and they'll just say no. And it's like, okay, this is a conversation. You're allowed to say more than no. Yeah. And, or how you doing today? Good. Okay.
Spectacular.
There needs to be a story. And I always go to not just meet and do that, but have those stories ready to go.
That's a really good point. And so that's one of the things that I tell people to have in their pocket, apart from like questions, just general questions for an individual. What's your favorite color? What's your, what do you do for a living? What kind of hobbies do you have? Like anything you feel like asking, because asking the question is very, very important.
Yeah.
On that level. But as far as your story goes, have a elevator pitch, 30 seconds, have a shorter 2-minute version, and then have about a 5-minute version.
Yep.
And depending on the type of conversation you're having, you can interject with whatever it is that you feel is appropriate at the time. And that is something that you need to practice out loud beforehand.
Yes.
Because if you're saying it for the first time and it's coming off your lips for the first time, it's not going to go well.
It's not going to go well, and it'll probably go way too long.
Yeah. That's my problem, and your problem too, I imagine. But
everybody's problem. And there's one individual that I've met, and I love this guy. He's really good. He's got a huge heart for doing things like within community colleges and stuff. And I was in a meeting with him, and we were going around the room, and everybody was doing their 2 minutes. He was 30 minutes.
No way.
I'm not kidding. And
30 minutes for an intro?
Yes.
Wow.
And so the meeting was over. And we didn't actually get any work done. And then I see him again, and he's like, I won't be long. And I was like, all right, I'm going to say it was 10 minutes. And I was like, and so there's some people that just, they feel they have to give you everything. And the truth is you want to spur conversation. And see, that's where I go to with things. Like, so I'll have a story that I know that somebody will be able to add to it.
Right.
and it could be the simple stuff.
So that's a higher level way to look at it, but it is a good way to look at it. So you want to be inclusive with your stories. And then you also, in that same kind of vein, if you're listening to the story, you want to be looking for those cues. Yeah. But that's more like networking 201. And this is what we're talking about.
We're still sticking to 101. Yeah, I've got ways to connect people in my meeting. Yeah. And I do that because I feel like I'm just genuinely curious.
Yeah. So being genuinely curious helps in networking a lot.
Yes.
Like a whole lot, because people can tell when you're actively listening or when you're interested in what they're saying, and curiosity drives that interest in a way that it's more impactful.
Yeah.
Having said that, though, that's still higher tier things.
I'll stop going to the PhD level of networking.
And so we're still talking about what events to pick.
Yeah.
And so you get your reps in on anything. It can be industry related, but I would say before I started getting into the intentional pieces, that I would definitely want to meet several random people and give it a shot. And so have a couple of questions, like I said, at any event.
Okay.
And if you're going to a network or an industry specific event, because you've talked to enough people or you've looked up on the internet and you found those meetings that you want. So you host a social meetup for data scientists.
I do. Yep.
And so anybody who's in comp sci, data sci, anything like that.
Don't even have to, you just have to go, and you just have to be interested.
But it's a perfect environment for what we're talking about here, because that's a big focus on like why you come. You come to meet the people who are hiring people, and you come to meet other people who are also looking for jobs, but who also have those jobs. And then you're learning things from every single person you're potentially talking to.
Right.
So have those questions ready to go. Have goals for what you want to get done while you're there. And if you're brand new, just any two people are fine. But if you're going to an event that has a published participant list, or if you've been there enough to know who's going to be there, have individual, for lack of a better words, targets for conversation.
Yeah, they may or may not be there, but if they are there, you are ready for them.
Yeah, and so I've got a sample that we can go through if we get time. But it's like, what are my stated goals of going to, it was the Christmas party from a few years ago for the NTC. Like, who did I want to meet? Who did I want to talk to? Why did I want to talk to them? All that kind of stuff is like things I wrote down before I even got there.
Yeah.
But just to make sure that I was effective while in that situation, because we were talking about this a little bit before, but I get caught up in a good conversation way too easily in those situations, and so I've got to be mindful of my time.
Yeah, and I get a lot of times where I care about talking to that individual. I'm never going to say I don't, because I love every conversation, but I only am there for an hour and a half, let's say.
Yeah.
And if I spend 30 minutes with you, the other 60 now has to be parsed out for the other people. And it's like you start going, am I going to be able to see that one person if I keep talking over here? And I'm like, oh, shoot. But it's like, okay, if I missed it, I missed it. And I've been sending emails lately to people saying, hey, I knew we were both at the event last night. I didn't get to see it. Let's go grab coffee.
See, that's an amazing, the follow-up after the fact, even with the people you didn't talk to, is super great.
Yeah.
You're creating mind space, and that's what networking is ultimately all about, is the information you take from it and the mind space you create in the people that you want to create in the group.
Okay, picking events. It's not easy they don't just come right in front of you and say, come to my event, right?
Yeah.
You got to go and seek those out. Any tips that you have for how you find events that you would go to?
So Google, Facebook groups, all that other kind of stuff is great, but I typically find events from people.
Okay.
And so I'll go to something that's at the NTC, and if I wind up talking to an educator and I want to know, well, where do I go to learn about technology and education? Like, do you have a meetup group? And it's like, oh, well, yeah, sure, we've got a meetup group, or I do this, that, and the other thing. And so maybe I'll go try all that stuff out, but I have to be unafraid to go to brand new events and see what the lay of the land looks like. Yeah,
there are websites that are specifically for meetups. Meetup.com is a great first one. If you have absolutely no idea how to get started, or you want to find things in new fields. For example, I've gone to ones that are just hobby-based, running groups. And you can either find that on websites that are specifically for running, or maybe, I've gone on and I wanted to find one for vegetarian cooking, and I found one.
Well, you're going back to your data science meetup group. Like that's hosted on meetup.com,
It is, and we also post just on LinkedIn, and that's it.
So this is something that's important because a lot of people will psych themselves out before they even show up to the event. And so that, maybe they see it on meetup.com and they're like, oh, but this says it's for data scientists and I'm not exactly a data scientist.
Right.
Like I shouldn't go because I would be bothering them and stuff like that. But what's your perspective as the person who puts it together?
My target is the data curious person that wants to learn things about data science.
Right.
Of course, being in the academic field, that's what I care about. That is actually what usually shows up, is most of the time you're getting people that are starting out in their career. So you have that. But then you have the senior data scientist from a healthcare company that loves to be around people.
Yeah.
And what I'm noticing is we're starting to get the mid-level people as well that are remote and have no connection to data science folks anymore. And so you've got all these different groups. So I love it when you get the entry level all the way to CEO style, and everything in between. And it's okay to be the newbie. It's okay to be a student.
That's important.
Yes.
It's okay to be new. It's okay to be important because you're not gatekeeping. And if you were to show up to a group like that and you did feel like they're gatekeeping, then that's not for you. That's not a group for you because groups should be inclusive.
Yeah. If it is not for everybody, it probably has wording in there that says that.
That's true.
Because we just started a CDO peer group. You
can't just show up for that one.
That one you got to have a credential or a job of some sort, and it's got peer group in that. So peer group would come across as that. But if it says meetup in the name, everybody's there. The meetup scene before COVID was amazing. You could go to anything on any given night. We talk about it. I see certain people at every single meetup I go to, and I'm like, are they just here for the pizza? Is this how they get fed every night? And maybe it is.
Maybe.
Maybe it is, or they just really like networking.
Yeah.
And I asked one person that once, and he's like, I just love being around people. And I'm single, and this is what I like to do. And I'm like, that's great. So I think there's a lot of different ways, I don't think you can start out by just asking people, though. That's why I think, look at Google and Facebook groups and meetup.com. I just think, remember, these are the data folks. They're already not talking to people, so we need them to just get started. I would look at meetup.com.
Yeah, just some internet resource for sure, because you can go to Reddit. Like there's a data science subreddit that you can ask questions in there. So it's like, is anybody from Nashville that knows about a data science meetup or whatever his goals are? Yeah. Or from a job perspective, like he can find those people that are willing to talk to him, and that is what I believe you've hammered home at this point. Like you want them to show up.
Yes.
And that's
eat my pizza, please. Seriously, like we've got one tomorrow night, and we just don't. What happens a lot of times is we get RSVPs through meetup.com, and if we get 60% of them to show, we're happy. Yeah. And so right now, I think we've got like 60 people that say they're going to come, and that's great. And so does that mean we're going to get about 40 to show? Yeah, that's about right. And that's a great networking event. That's low. I would not feel intimidated in that room. And what I think is important for me then is I find the people that are new and I help them. Yeah, that's what I do a lot of times. And I don't want to get off the framework, but picking events, I think we've hit that pretty good. Is the next thing how to dress?
Yeah, it's just some basic stuff on dress. Like the pandemic really changed a lot of that because it used to be anything that was kind of professional related. You had to show up and dress to the nines to put your best foot forward. Like maybe not always a tie or anything like that, but for the most part, you had to be dressed formally. Okay. Nowadays, it's not so much formal. You can do less formal attire so long as it's sharp. So you want to look well presented.
Yeah, you don't want to be messy.
Yeah, that's the main thing to stay away from. Is just don't be messy and make sure you're not make sure you're not too casual. Because more casual dress is definitely accepted these days, but like typically a branded T-shirt is a little too casual. Depending on the group you're going to talk to, and so some of these groups are just come as you are, and that's totally fine. But anything where you're trying to impress somebody, looking sharp is definitely the way to go.
Well, and so I think we stick to how to dress is more for that higher level event, right? Is what we're referring to. So yeah, if you're going to pickleball meetup, you can wear shorts. But if you're going to the data science meetup, can you wear shorts? Yeah.
but probably not your first time.
Yeah, and shorts and flip flops. Some people can pull that off. I can't, and I won't. And I'll tell you, I'm a jeans guy a lot of times, but they won't have holes and they won't look like they're my ones I paint the fence in or anything like that. I have very nice jeans. That's what I would wear to something like that.
Same. Yeah. I keep a pair of dark jeans that I never wash. I just put them in the cold water and all that kind of stuff, just to make sure that I can stay sharp and I'm not, I don't have any frayed edges or holes in my knees or anything like that.
Right.
And so just make sure that your appearance, you're clean and well put together. That's basically it. Because you'd be surprised. Well, I mean, you wouldn't be surprised, but to the listeners out there, you may be surprised how many people come to these things stinking.
That's one that that's a non-starter. You cannot show up and just do yourself a favor. Don't have I don't know how else to say this, but don't have a smell when you show up.
Use the DO for your BO and brush your teeth.
Oh, do I go like that?
No, that's not a joke though. That's for real.
Oh, that is true.
Yeah.
Wah, wah, wah. No, I won't do that.
Because we had an event not too long ago where a guy who it was unfortunate for him because he was a close talker. And for those you don't know, the close talkers, they've got to be in your personal space. And if you back up, they come into your personal space again. And he had the bad breaths too.
Oof.
And so we some folks who were more senior at that networking event kind of took him aside.
Okay.
Offered him some gum and all that kind of stuff because it really can ruin the conversation.
It can, yeah. And I think dress for me, what I'll normally do is I will go home and change before I go to an event, or I'll have different clothes because I do like to look. I don't want to show up in a dress shirt, dress pants to a meetup. Yeah. Even in the tech world, ties are not a thing. It's rare when you see somebody wearing a tie in the tech space. You can obviously wear a suit jacket. Don't be cold if but you could also wear a Patagonia jacket and look and fit right in. Yeah. A nice hoodie is fine. Just don't put it up and look like that guy. But I think. Do you feel? We're both men talking about how to dress. For females, do you feel it's a different aspect to it?
So from my experience, and this is just post-pandemic stuff, women actually have way more flexibility in what works and what doesn't. And so I was at a WeBank conference. I've actually gone twice since the pandemic, and the same rules apply. So look sharp, look clean, make sure it's an outfit that's put together and stuff like that. But I saw women in full-on formal dresses and high heels and that type of thing. But the most common thing was a business suit or a business outfit situation with some sneakers that matched that outfit exactly. So I saw a bunch of Jordans that were pink and black. And pink and black pantsuits and stuff like that. Okay. So I thought that was really cool, and I'm really glad that that's the way things are going. But because we don't need to be so formal all the time.
Yeah, and I think the one thing I do like, especially for females, is that I like that they can be comfortable now. And, you know what I mean, and not have to worry about going. But I'd say the ones that come to ours. I would say it's more of a casual dress, dress as in, jeans and a normal top kind of stuff.
I heard a lot of ladies complaining about their feet hurting, before when they had to wear the skinny shoes, the pumps, the whatever. And so it makes sense that most of them are wearing sneakers now, or a lot of them are wearing sneakers in those types of environments, especially when they're walking all day and stuff. Because this is a big trade show that I'm talking about. Yeah.
Do you? What do you bring? Do you bring things
Oh,
would you
cards.
have?
It used to be
do you
cards.
have business cards?
Yeah, not anymore. Now I just do LinkedIn. I just got
Okay.
I got my QR code easily available and whatnot. But there's one more piece that I want to talk about with regards to dress,
Okay.
and this is something that you can play around with, but just accessories or parts of clothing that stand out.
Okay.
And so you mentioned, or I think you mentioned that I wear a bow tie sometimes. Maybe not. No, you said ties are not a thing in the IT world.
Yeah.
But sometimes I wear a bow tie. And for a while, I was the bow tie all the time guy until I realized that I was becoming the bow tie guy. And so I stopped.
I hate bow ties.
I love them, but
Yeah. Guys from Detroit do not wear bow ties.
well, that's your problem.
Yeah. If you're from Mississippi, I guess you would.
Well, we got this whole southern
Yeah, not me.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I wear a bow tie. I didn't learn how to tie one until I was like 35, though.
I would have no clue how to tie one.
Well, that's your loss because people remember you if you have a bow tie.
Ah.
And so I have a strategy, if you call it, where I wear a bow tie, usually the busiest day of a show or something like that, where I'm dressed up as nice as I'm going to be, like as formally as I'm going to be, because I got to justify the bow tie. And then I'll usually wear some glasses that stand out too.
Yeah,
and
you do like your glasses.
I do,
Yeah.
but it's not just because it makes a fashion statement. It's because people are more likely to remember you.
Yeah.
In those situations, and so I've got a unique look. I've got a red hair, red mustache, like funky glasses, and a bow tie. And they may not remember my name, but when they see me again, they'll be like, "Oh, I remember that guy."
Yeah, and you can pull off a hat at events. And so you'll wear a ball cap. Sometimes when it's more of a casual one. I have never done that. I also don't really wear ball caps.
But I've got hats that are my more like formal sharp hats that I never wear. I don't get sweaty in at all.
Yeah.
I don't treat them like normal hats. I treat them like fashion accessories.
Yeah, and I will say you pull it off. Now the purple pants you wear sometimes, I'm like, I don't know about those. You wearing those right now?
Yep.
Oh, well,
Yep.
I didn't realize that. But see, I will do my best to make it where my clothes are not maybe going to be remembered a lot of times. Like I don't do the silly socks. I let everybody else be silly with socks. And I don't know if it's more of my short thing or whatever.
You don't have to have like a gimmick or anything like that. But if you do, just be intentional with it.
Yeah.
Play with it. Just have fun with it, because sometimes you don't want to stand out, or some people never want to stand out, and that's fine. But I don't mind standing out some, because if I'm working a room, like it's easier for me. It facilitates more conversation. We'll say that.
Well, I think you have done that very well. You tastefully can stick out a little bit. So, I think people do. I think what you're intending has worked, because you're in a room, you do stick out. You're a little bit taller and the red hair, but it's more of, you'll have a little bit different look than somebody else. And so remember that Charlie guy, the other Charlie guy.
Yeah. So just a quick story on the dress thing. So this summer, you and I met before the summer party at the NTC,
Right?
And we were game planning or something like that,
Right.
And then we went to the show, and I didn't know this, but apparently there was a dress up like a geek contest.
Yes.
And then I was walking.
That's right.
I didn't sign up for it at all. And I was walking out of the building, and a lady came up to me and she was like, "Hey, can I take your picture for the thing?" She took my picture, and then I was wearing my Ray-Bans that have the cameras in them.
Yeah.
And she was like, "What's up with that?" And I told her, and then the way she reacted, I was like, "Well, whatever they're giving away, I'm about to win something." And just in the clothes that I normally wear,
That's right.
I won like top geek.
You did.
And
you did.
And even when she started calling out names, I was like, "Excuse me, I got to go win something real quick." And I did. I want to.
And that was an outdoor event, so you did dress a little bit more fun.
Yeah, it was shorts and a t-shirt.
Yeah, but a lot of people were shorts and a t-shirt at that one, because it was 100 degrees that day, and we were in a parking lot, because that's
I will say that you weren't wearing shorts.
I don't wear shorts in public much.
That's fair.
Yeah.
So we've talked a whole bunch about how to dress, what to think about it, and I want to go one more time through how to prepare for the specific shows.
Okay.
So if you don't know anybody, that's fine. Just come up with a couple of generic questions that you're going to ask, and then have goals for yourself. Like, I'm going to meet X people. I'm going to do these things, and then try to do them. because everything is going to revolve around you asking questions. Make sure you ask those questions, because asking the question is the most important thing you can do almost in any situation, but especially in networking situation. I got you. So if it is industry specific, just make sure that make sure they're questions related to what you want to know. So you've done all of this business. You've actually showed up. You're dressed well. You showed up to the event, and you walk in, and there's about 100 people chit-chatting in a room.
Okay. Nobody
notices you walk in. You go get your name tag or whatever it is that they're giving out. Then what do you do then?
Right. What do you do?
Well, so that's most people's hardest decision to make. And the way I do it is I walk in, I make a big circle around the room. Like sometimes I actually do circle the room, but I at least take in the entire room at one time.
Acting like a shark, trying to find out your prey.
Just getting an idea. Like sometimes I'll walk past, and this is more the 201 stuff, but sometimes I'll walk past people having conversations, and if I like something that they're saying, I'll stop. And if I don't, then I'll just keep on going until I decide kind of what I want to do. But say that there's a group of people, and one of those people is like somebody I've told myself, like, oh, I want to talk to them before I leave. Well, if they're talking to somebody, how do you know if you can go up and just approach them?
Yeah.
The way I look at it is when people congregate in a cocktail party situation, which is just, like everybody standing up, not really tables, unless they're like little standing tables and whatnot. They'll make circles.
They do.
Or semicircles.
That's a really good point. Yep.
So two people standing, talking to each other, that's a line. So there's two open sides. So you can walk up to either side of two people talking to each other.
Okay.
And
you're not interrupting if it's only two people.
So you don't interrupt at all.
Okay.
So we'll get to that in just a second. But, think about this in your brain. You got two people making a line. You walk up to either side. Now you're three people in a triangle. So there's three people in a triangle. That means that there's one more side that somebody could potentially walk up to, and then you've got a square or a circle if your shoulders are close enough or whatnot. It's a closed circuit, so there's not room for anybody else to walk up. I don't insert myself in groups like that unless there's something specific, and that I wouldn't do this in the beginning for any reason whatsoever, because I don't like interrupting and making it all about me. I just like sliding on into the conversation.
Yeah,
and all I do for the first however long is just make eye contact, smile, listen, do all that type of stuff. And at some point they'll either ask you your name, or you can have some kind of information to throw in there, and then you can introduce yourself.
Yeah.
And
that's perfectly fine to do. And I'm saying that because it is perfectly fine to do.
It's the expectation.
Yeah.
So if a group of people are closed off, meaning that they're shoulder to shoulder, like say it's two people kind of next to a table or a chair where you can't really get into that other side, or it's three people that are standing really close to each other, in a way that makes it to where you can't easily go in and stand shoulder to shoulder with them. Because if you're behind them at all, you're not really in the group.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'll go and I'll stare at somebody, but that's more of just to be funny. Like I'll go stare at them kind of in their periphery until they eventually like look over and whatnot. But if they're closed off, I'm just not messing with them. And that sucks too, because the very first time that I wanted to talk to you at a social event, like you were in closed groups. It was when you were on crutches still.
Oh, yeah.
You were in a closed group the entire night. And it was because people kept on coming over to you.
And you do get to a point where you're trying to fight to get into the room. And I'm not saying that literally could just happen to you. Like 3 or 4 people, you get caught up. And so I do think it's important to make this point for people. You're going to an event where the expectation is to meet new people.
Yeah.
So don't think they don't want to meet you.
Yeah.
And so it's okay to say, hey, how are you? That kind of thing, and do exactly what you said. And I've never thought of it that way, where complete the incomplete circles. But if you think of it that way, I bet you it would be very easy to figure out where you can and cannot go.
Yeah. So you can look at it. You can pretty easily make a round in a room, or even just look across the room and see who's got open conversations and who doesn't.
Yeah.
And so going and putting yourself into one of those conversations, that's where the couple of questions you had queued up are valuable. That's where your personal story that's either 30 seconds, 1 minute, or 5 minutes is important. Because you really want to you want to get out there really quick and say, hey, I'm Charlie Yielding, CEO of G Squared Wireless, and I'm here for this or whatever.
And so, and with that, okay, I'm looking and I see that you do say it. I was about ready to say, do you remember names? What do you do about names? What are you trying to capture yourself? Because you are trying to create a conversation, but you also want something that you're leaving with.
Right.
So how do you do that?
Well, it's based off your goals.
Okay.
Well, at least that's how I started. I base it on my goals, and so I've got high priority targets that are people that I absolutely want to talk to, and so I'll make an opportunity to talk to them. And then I've got I may have a few people that I'd like to talk to that I may know that are going to be there, or hope that they're there, or whatever. Yeah. But then there's like a tertiary group of didn't know I wanted to talk to them, but I really did.
Yeah.
And so those people are the people that I try to focus on the most. Like, okay, who was that person? What did they do? And then a little snippet about what we talked about, and I'll write that down. If we connected on, I try to connect on LinkedIn now, whereas it used to just be, give me, let's swap cards, and then I would just go through my cards at the end of the night and all that kind of stuff. But now I've got to find new ways to connect with people outside of the group, because nobody carries cards anymore.
That's right.
And so LinkedIn is typically where I go. We've been doing a lot of QR scanning. Sean has even made the burned in wood QR code for a watch band. And so Shauna's got it down to where if somebody asks her for her LinkedIn information, she just shows them the side of her watch. Yeah. And they can scan that QR code. Yeah. And those types of things are really good. And then just going back and saying, okay, I talked to these people, and these were the conversations that were relevant, and I'll try to write it down. And so, for instance, I was at a networking event, and I got to talking to this guy just about parenting, but it was an industry event, and this person is somebody that I wanted to build a relationship with. I wasn't trying to get anything out of them immediately, but I wanted to know them. And so we wound up talking about how his 18-year-old left for college, and he's flourishing. And it was really impactful because he was talking about how hard a time it was, how hard a time he had in high school with relationships and stuff like that. And so the next time I wrote it down, and then the next time I saw him, which was 2 years later, I asked him how his son was doing. Wow. Because I knew I was going to an event that he would be at, and I went back and looked at my notes. Yeah. Along with the other people that I knew were going to be there, and then went forward with it from there. Just use that information to carry the relationship through. Yeah,
it's always funny. There's a couple of things that are cues of people that don't know me or do, or people that pay attention. And I'm somebody that talks about my kids a lot. And I think they're easy conversations. I don't like to get into politics. So I talk about kids. Yeah. Nobody's going to complain about that, and dogs. And so a lot of people will ask me, how's your son? How's this? How's, and that does mean a lot to me the next time I see somebody, for sure.
Yeah. So it helps remember in those little things. And so if you remember back when we were talking about the personal process stuff, journaling is something that's, it's incredibly useful for everyday items. But then when you think about this kind of stuff, it adds on to it. So it's helping me retain information about people that I've met in a more impactful way. So the next time I see them, I'm able to carry the relationship further. Yeah. So instead of us rehashing something we've already talked about, it's I make that trust connection by asking about the thing that we mutually have talked about before, and then we can go on to new stuff.
And I do like the idea of LinkedIn being kind of my network, my way to organize my network, because that's something that has grown, but the ability to see the connections to other people, it makes sense, and you can always get a hold of them there.
Yeah. So one thing that I wish LinkedIn would do is when we're adding somebody, I wish that there was a category met at an event or something along those lines, so we can go back and kind of
remember.
Review.
Yeah. Or have notes on people, which then you're going off into some type of CRM or something like that. So
So the back to the initiation though. Okay. So what we've talked about so far is the pretty basic initiation for actually approaching people. Right. But what if you're too scared? What if it's too much to walk up to a group of people and just be a part of their group? Well, I've got a thing I stumbled on early on. I call it fishing, and it's it's intentionally setting yourself up in a way to where people will approach you. And so the very first time I ever did this, I was just some rinky-dink, like it was like a business that was putting on a social hour. But it was like 40 people or something like that. So nothing big, and it was in a house. And so it was a weird spot, and it was like finding the room to talk to people was weird. But up front, there was 2 or 3 chairs just kind of sitting there by themselves, and nobody was sitting in the chairs. And so I just kind of sat down for a break, but I'm in a social event. I didn't pull out my phone. I didn't seem like I was being exclusive or being apart. I was I was watching people walk by, and I was making eye contact with the people that would make eye contact. And eventually somebody just sat down. And I had a full-blown conversation. When they sat down, I was like, well, what can I do that again? And so as it turns out, yes, you can.
Okay.
So fishing is just finding a spot that's inclusive, meaning that anybody can walk up.
I think that's the important part. Don't go to the corner.
Yeah. So if you've got one of those round tables that people stand at when they're eating their little hors d'oeuvres or having their drink or whatever, just stand at one of those. Have your drink with you or whatever you've got, but have your head up and make eye contact with the room. So eye contact in a room.
Be inviting.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. You're being inviting because you're saying, I'm looking at you. And if you want to have you're like, just the eye contact is enough to say, like, if you want to talk, I can talk. And
I would say part of that fishing, you kind of mentioned it, is if it's a place where you have hors d'oeuvres or a place to put things, that's ideal because people are looking for the spot to put their plate.
Yeah.
And so if you have a spot, and people aren't going to completely ignore if it's a table where obviously 3 or 4 people can be there and there's only one right now, it's expected that other people would come and sit next to you and say, can I come here? And then there's a conversation.
So the other piece of this is that, you're in your head thinking about why or why not, why you will or won't like be networking with people by walking up to a group, but you've decided to fish here. There are other people in that room that feel just like you, that don't want to walk up to some strange group of people who are actively in a conversation that look like they could be cliquey, but you don't know because you're brand new. Maybe it is a clique. Maybe you are bothering them by going in, going into their conversation and all that kind of stuff. And so you're inviting to those types of people. So the people that may not be the best networkers, and those are the kind of good conversations that you can have on the front end or when you're newer at networking, because like you can literally talk about what you're doing. Yeah. Like that's somebody that's on your level with regards to networking and potentially other stuff. Or maybe it's just somebody that's a person you wanted to talk to, but they're also just not good at networking.
Right. And so, that right there, I'm trying to think of, at our meetups, I get so many people that are scared, and the first time ever at a meetup. Yeah. And they'll be there and they're like, I've never done this before. I mean, they'll literally just tell me that. And if you are honest about it, a lot of times those that are good at networking will grab you and say, let me introduce you to these folks. Yeah. What do you like to do? And they're like, oh. And so there's also that side of it where, be the little puppy dog kind of thing, and somebody will take you under their wing. I do it all the time. And it's, if I see somebody new, I will go up to them immediately, find out who they are, what they want, and then I get them into a conversation because I see the struggles of the normal tech person. And that's not what I'm asking people to do here, because that's because I've been doing that for 30 years. I want to connect people. But I would say that's another avenue is you can initiate, but also initiate with those that can initiate on your behalf. Yeah. So you were talking about it earlier. Do you want to give that a name? What, the connectors? The connectors. Yeah. And I think that's every time I'm in one of those circles, I'm figuring out how to connect people. Yeah. And so a lot of times a good example is we had a new graduate, just graduated with a data science undergrad degree, and it was his first time at our event. And he's like, I went through it, but I really don't feel like I'm up to things. And I'm like, all right, I want you to talk to people. And so he came up to me and said this. And the reason he came up to me is he was from MTSU, I think, and obviously he knew who I was. And but if I didn't take him and say, I want you to meet this person, he would have sat in the corner.
So you're saying he hadn't listened to this podcast yet then?
He hasn't listened to this podcast and figured out how to complete circles, which I think that's brilliant. And I'll do that probably 5 times per meetup.
You introduce people?
Yeah, I'm the connector. Yeah. And a lot of times I'm connecting people after the fact as well, and that's good follow-up. So
that's just good in general.
Like, it is. And I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it for a professional reason. I'm doing it because I genuinely want to connect people,
right?
And I enjoy that.
Well, that's a part of why you're a community leader, though.
Well,
because you lead communities.
I do enjoy building communities too, and that is not for everybody. You know, that is for sure. That is a lot of work, and I think though, going from entry level all the way to CEO and having that be a neat environment and not intimidating is the ideal thing. And you're talking about, if you are that entry level person, here's how to get going with it. I think that's great.
Yeah. And so if at any point in time, like at the social meetup or any of the NTC stuff or any of the NTC meetings, if anybody ever wants to practice this kind of stuff, just come talk to me.
If you go to the Data Science Nashville meetup and I've had somebody come and says, I could care less about data science, but we did a ChatGPT one and they're like, I just wanted to learn more about that.
Yeah.
And they've come to now 3 because they got to know people.
Yeah.
And I think that's really good. Let me ask you this. You show up. We're assuming you're showing up by yourself. Is it good to go with coworkers or friends or because not every time you can bring people?
Well, there's 2 levels of participation as a group, and there's one where you're just kind of going together, and then once you're there, you
go do your own thing.
Yeah, you go do your own thing. But if you're there as a group and you have a goal as a group, you have to determine whether you pair up. And so if you're newer, pairing up is great.
Yeah.
Sorry for the plosives, but like pairing up is great. But when you're more advanced, usually divide and conquer works better.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is like, so anytime I go to a work event and I'm with somebody who's experienced, I tell them don't even come close to me. Don't sit next to me at the tables or whatnot. Like we get plenty of time out of here. And we don't need to be buddies here.
Yeah, there's nothing worse than people going to an event and they're with their coworkers and they go off in the corner with their coworkers.
Yeah, so do not do that because you're wasting your time.
Yeah,
like if your goal is to hang out with your friends or your coworkers, that's one thing.
Yeah,
but if your goal is to meet new people, don't rely on people you know as a crutch. Because it's not just coworkers. If somebody knows you or knows me at a meeting, but they don't know anybody else, they're likely to come over and spend more time with us just because it's easier.
Yes,
and that's how it works for everybody. But try to stay away from that because you're only hurting your own progress.
Yeah.
But if you do go with a group of people and you try to get on the same page, like create goals that you all have. I've taken 3 or 4 people at one time to an event, and we came up with goals that meet 2 new people, come up with 2 new things, and it was 3 or 4 coworkers that I brought, and they wound up just talking to each other and texting on their phones the whole time, and I never took them back to another one because there's no point in us doing this if you're not even going to get up and talk to people.
Yeah, and for me. Coming from the academic world, I did a lot of social events. Nobody came with me. It's just not a academic, most academics struggle going out to those kind of things, bridging the gap, going over into, the practitioner world.
Yeah.
I was at things 2 to 3 nights a week. If I didn't have kid events on those nights, I was probably at something.
Yeah.
And I would travel to do that because I lived in Murfreesboro. And so I put in the miles to get that in, but I almost always went by myself.
Yeah.
And so I had to get used to that early on. And I can remember one of the first few professional things. I did not talk to many people or I got one person and I was like, oh, at least I talked to one person, And I mean, I'm talking, this is only 15, 20 years ago. And now to get to a point where, I'm very comfortable and I don't have to know people. I'm not talking about I go into a room and I know everybody.
Yeah.
I have those. We all have that, where we go to social events and we know everybody. I'll go to something. I was at something 2 nights ago and knew 3 or 4 out of the 100 people there.
Yeah.
And was completely fine. and have now a new 97 new friends, you know. But again, that's a lot of work. So yeah, I've always done it on my own. When I do bring people, they know I'm not going to stay with them.
Yeah.
Because I'm somebody that likes to be the social guy that meets people.
So I call my networking method the Dixon networking method. Dixon. Yeah, because Ben Dixon is a person I used to work with. Shout out to Ben Dixon from Tractor Supply.
Huh?
And we did most of the time that I spent like filling out this framework was with him, and he taught me the most valuable lesson, and that's always ask the question. And I mentioned that earlier, and I cannot understate the importance of it. So if you want to know something from somebody in a room, you ask the question. And you don't let anything deter you from doing that. Because I've seen him ask questions that I never would have thought would have been something that would have been successful, and it absolutely worked out.
Okay.
You can never get anything more harmful than a no. And that's important to remember, because a lot of people in their minds, they think a no is like, no, and you're a bad person for asking. And that's just not how people think. Like if you ask things that are outlandish, and you have an expectation that they're going to accept it, that's one thing. But he would always ask the question with no expectation of what the answer was, or what it should be. Like he knew what he wanted, but he wouldn't say like, I'm asking this and let's do what I want. He's asking it. It's like, no, okay, thank you. I asked the question. That's it.
Yeah.
And
and of course we're talking about very tasteful things. We're not, don't go into a situation and completely make it an awkward thing, but you're talking about from a professional standpoint, something
so
you want
like
to know.
An easy thing like question to ask is like, do you know anybody who's hiring?
Yeah.
Like that's an easy question to ask. Or are you guys hiring?
Yeah.
Do you know of any jobs that are open? Like those types of things. So if your goal is to get a job, you should be asking questions related to getting a job.
And say it.
Yeah.
Say it 100%. If you are there to get a job, make that known. And if, at my meetup, if you're new, looking for a job, or you are looking to hire, I make you stand up and talk.
Oh, now you're going to scare people away.
No. They don't have to do it because I ask for volunteers.
Well, you did just say you make them.
I do make them. I make everybody do it, and they're always happy they do it.
Yeah. I saw some very nervous people get up and self-promote at the last one, and it was both beautiful and awesome at the same time, because I haven't gone through my nervous phases and stuff like that. I get a lot of joy watching other people go through that same awfulness, because I don't feel that awfulness anymore. And now that I see it in other people, I know the struggles they're going through. Yeah. And I can sympathize with them, but I still encourage them to beat down that door until somebody opens it.
A very welcoming community is what you have. So we do 2 hours usually. The first 30 minutes is social. Then we do a speaker for an hour, and then we have a half hour after. Right at the start of the speaker, that's when we do that kind of stuff. And people stay at the end and talk. And then you see those people that stood up have 2 or 3 people that are more experienced hanging around saying, because that's another thing I always say is, if you are somebody that is experienced or has, some thoughts for these folks, you're not allowed to leave until you talk to one of them. And I usually say it like that because that's my thing. And people, I think, appreciate that because now we're getting people to actually talk. And so
you're volunteering them that they have to do stuff.
Absolutely. All right. You got some other things on here that are very interesting. I'm going to ask this one because I think it is like, if you're going in and you're trying to get a job and you've got a person that's talking to you that's not going to help you toward that, but they won't leave you alone. How do you disengage politely?
So this is one of the most important pieces that I struggled with, and most people struggle with.
Sure,
it's just how to let somebody down easily.
Yeah.
But before we get into that, I want to challenge the way you're thinking about this, because these are not normal, like, everyday conversations. These are conversations with intent, meaning that everybody showed up to this social event for one reason or another. And falling into an easy conversation is fun. But like you said, when you've only got an hour and a half, you don't want somebody taking up 30 minutes of that just on a conversation about puppies or whatever. Puppies are great.
Puppies are.
But that's not what you're there for.
Right.
So disengaging, there's a lot of tasteful ways to do it. So if you're at a place where where there's drinks and your drink is empty, you can say, "Oh, excuse me, I got to go get a drink." But it's completely and totally okay to say, "Hey, excuse me, I see somebody over there that I need to talk to before the end of the evening. That's free." Or you don't have to go into too much detail, but just like, "Excuse me for a moment, I got to go.
I got to catch that person before they go."
And that's completely fine.
It is. Yeah.
It's completely fine. Like, so I've done the handshake walk away, like where we get to the end of a sentence and I'm like, "It's been really good talking to you." I don't even give them any more opportunity. Like like, "Have a good night" or anything like that. It's just been really good talking to you. Bye. And then I walk off.
Yeah.
And that's completely fine. There's no ill will in it. There's no hard feelings about it because, like we said before, sometimes you got a plan, or you should have a plan before you go to these things, and you shouldn't let. This is not to be mean, but you shouldn't let people with irrelevant stuff or irrelevant stories or conversations keep you from doing that.
Yeah.
Not to say that in a normal situation they wouldn't be your best friend. You talk for hours about those puppies or your kids or whatever, but your time is important, and managing that time is like how you get it done. And so sometimes I've even got to where I've set timers, because I'm not a big fan of looking at my watch.
I'm with you.
While I'm doing it, because that's something that's like, and this is something important too when you're in that group. Of like when you've inserted yourself into that group of people, you're not looking at your watch and you're not looking around the room. You're making eye contact with the person who's talking, and if they're going back and forth, you're just listening to the conversation until eventually they include you, because they'll start making eye contact with you when you're making eye contact, and then it becomes a group with one more person and whatnot. And so disengaging, same kind of way. Like I said, I set timers. So if I've got like 5 minutes or 10 minutes or something like that, I'll use it as just like a general bearing of like, I've stood here too long.
Yeah.
And then, when it starts buzzing, I'll just say like, it's been good talking to you. Or then I will look at my watch and kind of be like, "Oh yeah, I gotta get to this, to this other stuff." But constantly checking my watch, I'm not into, and constantly looking up and around the room at who else I could be talking to. It's something I don't do as well. Yeah. I will look around, but I'm not visually searching while I'm talking to people, if that makes sense.
Yeah, one thing this is just a quirk of mine. I will not eat at events.
I'm bad at it.
I don't do it. I just don't do it. And a lot of it went to the days of being vegetarian. And these days I'm not fully vegetarian anymore. So if a piece of meat was on my plate, I wouldn't freak out, but I was for a long time, and it would take over the conversations. And I just didn't want that to be the conversation.
Yeah, it's like, I don't want to be the bow tie guy. You don't want to be the vegetarian guy.
Yeah, and it just, because that's not my intent. I want to get to know others, and and then it's how do you get your protein? How do you get? And it's like, I've answered those questions 1,000 times, and it's not going anywhere. So I just won't eat, and I won't eat meat in public. It's just a weird thing. I don't like to eat in front of people.
That's fair.
It is what it is. And I think it goes back to the vegetarian thing. But I always have at least a water in my hand. I just even feel more comfortable with that. And I think that is so don't get like the hard alcohol and then have to chug it and then say, "Oh, I got to get another drink," if that's your move. But a water is always one where, you need something? I'm going to go grab another.
So from an alcohol perspective, wine usually comes in the smaller glasses.
That's true.
And so you need more refills on that. And so that's a double-edged sword, though, because if you don't count those glasses, you can be messed up real quick and in a hurry. Because it's like, I've got to dip out of my fourth group in 30 minutes. I need an excuse, go. So I don't use the drink stuff as an excuse all the time, but I will if it's convenient.
Yeah, I don't think I have good. I'm not at events for purpose.
Well,
I'm there literally to get to know people.
That's the 201 thing, though.
Yeah,
you're just increasing the number of people you know, and who knows what you'll find from those people. But in this case, like they're there for reasons, right. And like sharing themselves is just as much of the reason they're there as like getting information from others.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely people that I don't see except at social events, and they probably take up more of my time than I'd want them to.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm never leaving there going, gosh darn it, that was too much of that one person.
Well,
what I always say is, I wish I spoke to that person.
yeah.
I'll do that a lot. But I'm never mad that I don't think so, at least.
Well, that gets into something that we're not really going to get into today, but that's growing a network over time.
Yeah.
And so, and not just that, but multi-day events where you're not just dealing with like one small 2-hour cocktail party, but a multi-day like show or something like that.
Right.
But that's more than just what we're talking about today.
Well, but isn't conferences part of that? Like, people go to conferences and struggle with the same stuff.
100%. And then in the conferences, there are these things as well. So they'll have like happy hour, like, if you've been to a conference before, when they roll out the carts, the beer carts and stuff, everybody starts paying attention.
That's right.
And because everybody knows, it's like now we're about to get to the good networking where there's a lot less people who are apprehensive about approaching people and stuff. And so in some ways, alcohol can be, social lubricant, as they call it.
That's right.
But then it can quickly turn against you, especially when you're dealing with it in the professional capacities.
Yeah.
Because if I've been in situations where people indulge too much, and it's never a good look.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah. Hard stuff should not be part of your networking. It should be wine or beer, in my opinion, and a lot of water.
I try, but I don't do this all the time, but I try to do one drink of alcohol and then a water, and then a drink of alcohol and water. But then if I don't count, and if I'm not intentional with it, then it'll just be wine. Oh my God, I've messed up.
Yeah, and so you mentioned like the multi-day kind of things where a lot of times at night you have the option to do something, and I'll hear a lot of people say, I'm going to go back and work, and I'm thinking that is the least important thing you should be doing right now if there's good people to be around.
No, that's a really good point, and we can talk about it briefly, but like being at a show is a condensed it's condensed networking time that you don't really get outside of a show.
That's right.
Because you've got, like, if you think about it, I've got a show that I go to for 3 to 4 days, twice a year. And so and I'll go see there'll be the same people there 3 to 4 days, twice a year. Some buddies I've had for over a decade, I'll see them there 3 to 4 days, twice a year. When was the last time you hung out with your best friends 3 to 4 days, twice a year?
Yeah.
It's been a long time for me, and because my best friends still live in town.
Yeah, and I don't go off and have like the big guy excursion kind of stuff.
So some of these people could be closer friends than real life friends you have here in town.
Yeah.
And so that's something to keep in mind as well, is that sometimes you're going to be dealing with friend situations, and some of it you need to maintain, but then some of it you need to make sure that it's not getting in the way of like meeting the new folks, because there's always new folks. And just like you, if I go to that industry show and there's new people, I go talk to them.
Yeah.
I just want to see what they're all about, where they're from, because you never know who's going to be top tier. From an individual level. And so I do have really good friends that have come from that group, and we text now outside of that, but for a while it's just that's when I'd see them, and that's when we'd spend time together and whatnot. But they're also usually in that same boat of let's hit up this condensed time and take advantage of it, because if you let so many people, like curated people, like because it's if you're at a show, it's usually industry associations or like a business that's putting on a show that has the industry come to it and whatnot. And so there's so many people there and so little time relative to the number of people that you just got to, like, I've gone to those shows. Like I went to a full 5-day show one time, and on the day that we were flying back, I didn't have the energy but to just sit in a chair at the airport and look at a gray wall for hours. I didn't even want to get my iPad out and turn it on and watch a show because I was so zonked.
Yeah. Yeah. And so there's those. I have gone on fly-ins where you go with like 5 or 6 people, up to like 10 people, and we go to DC and we meet with all of our constituents. I've gone to Scottsdale, Arizona with our chamber, and there was close to 100 people that went to that, and it was like 2 or 3 days. I always come back and they're like, well, what was the best part? It was the people I went with, I got to know so much better.
Yeah.
And that you just, you get so much out of that. So I look for opportunities where I get to be with people that I want to network or get to know better. And, when it's multiple days, it's well worth it. And go to dinner.
Yeah.
Just, it's okay. You don't have to go back to your hotel room. That's one time. That's going to be, you never know what conversations you're going to have. Go to dinner.
Yeah.
And I can't encourage that enough, because the early days, I always went back to my room.
Did you?
I did.
I never did.
Because again, I was always by myself. And now if it's academic conferences, that's different than, practitioner based.
Oh, yeah, I was out. If there was people out, I was out.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm that. But I'd at least not just go back to my room.
That's cool.
Yeah, for sure. All right, what else you got on here?
So the last thing I wanted to talk about in this like entry level thing was so you meet somebody that is somebody you want to keep up with. What do you do? So earlier, I mentioned write down the stuff about that person, kind of keep up with like this is my experience with this person type journal entry or whatever you want to call it. And then I have a matrix, which is basically just a spreadsheet that's got 4 different categories. And then I put people's names, addresses, and numbers in there.
Okay.
And then if I have something written on them, I reference that. And so the 4 different categories are just when you reach out to them. And so I think the quickest I've got is once a week, and then once a month, once a quarter, I think I've got semi-annual. So maybe it's 5. Semi-annual, annual, and then just whenever. Whenever's like I'll have it in there, and then if I go in to check it, it'll just I'll see like, oh, it's been a while since I've talked to them. And so whenever, an example of whenever is like my old boss from Radio Shack. Like I don't message him all the time, but on his birthday, I'll send him a message or something like that. And so that's not really any specific cadence of keeping up. I mean, apart from it being annual, but it's based off his birthday rather than something else. But if it's a group of people that I'm trying to work into, like that weekly cadence is something that I try to keep up with. But then most people fit in that quarterly or semi-annual kind of cadence.
Gotcha.
And so any kind of mentees that I've had in the past that we're not communicating on a regular basis, like once a quarter, twice a year, something like that, I'll reach out to them. But I've got their names in a matrix, and then I've in my list, which I've got to get with Shauna on getting this all into Zapier.
I know. I was about ready to say we got to make this all automated.
Yeah, it'll their name will pop up and just say reach out to such and such. And so I do, and it's just like, hey, how you doing? Like what it is doesn't really matter unless it's I come across something that's relevant to something we've talked about before or something like that, and I'm like, hey, did you see this or did you see that? And what you're doing is you're showing them that you're thinking about them.
Yeah.
In that kind of action, and then that creates a little space for you in their brain, and so it's as the relationship matures, that space will grow and grow and grow. But those constant proactive touches on a regular cadence are the piece that like makes sure that it doesn't shrink, or like makes it to where the next time you see them, you carry the relationship even further. And what I mean by further, I mean like you get to know them better, and then they get to know you as well. And so if say you've got a certain set of skills, like you're making sure that they know for doggone sure that if they ever have a need for those skills, that you're a person that they think about. And so you've become the data guy.
Yep.
And so I've become the guy who knows the data guy.
Yeah.
And so if anybody wants access to Charlie Apigian, they come to me, and then I set it up.
Well, and I get a lot of people that in 2 different things. There's that where I get connected to a lot of people. A lot of times for things like this, how to help them get started in their careers, right?
I mean, that's where the email came from.
That's right. And then the other is I'll be at an event and you see the person and you're like, we always say we're going to get together and we don't, those kind of things. I know there's one person in particular where there's been twice now where we both have said, oh man, we got to get together because, what you're doing is great. And I know you can help us. And I'm like, oh, I want to help. And then 6 months later, I see them again at another event and we're saying the same thing. So being that follow-up. And so I have gotten good, you taught me how to capture better. And I still use drafts as my capture. I write that person's name instantly in there. And so that I have that follow-up.
Yeah. And you've been doing a lot more proactive following up after shows and stuff too. Like where you're emailing people and you're messaging people. And that's always something that I try to do. So for the industry show I go to, after I'm done, I'll go through the list And anybody I talk to, I'll send them a quick little note saying, it's good seeing you. Great talking about this. Good seeing you. Great talking about that, and all that kind of stuff. And it's not like it's impersonal because I started the same way. But what I'm showing them is like, hey, I enjoyed talking to you, and I remembered what we were talking about. And for the most part, it's stuff that's like I'm just being genuine. And and it helps that I'm being genuine because it comes across like that.
Yeah.
Now, having said that, there are people that you have to hold your nose when you talk to sometimes, but that's just how business works. You can't, not everybody's in it for the same reasons, but sometimes personalities may not mix, but you still have to make an effort to make it work. Because there's definitely a group of people that I had a hard time networking with early on, and that's affluent folk, because I don't get anything. Like I was talking to a CIO about like his golden parachute when a company, sold and let him go and all this other kind of stuff. And then he was talking about boating and a place where, like I know of, it's Pickwick Lake, which is like a fancy lake up there. He's talking about boating, and I was like, I don't know nothing about boats. But then now come to find out that you guys were part of a yacht club and stuff like that. So how wealthy were you, Charlie Pegian? I'm just messing.
No.
I had a hard time with
Everybody was a boater in Michigan.
Yeah. I had a hard time with that in the beginning. And so there's going to be the natural group of people that are harder to talk to, but I've worked to find common ground. I actually have people that I've asked before, how are you so good at connecting with affluent folks? And that was a part of like how I got better at it.
Yeah.
Because I asked the question.
I have to be around those kind of people a lot. And there's probably people that make me cringe. I do my best to stay vanilla, in other words, not give out what, I don't think I do it on here, what I would say my views are on controversial type stuff. And I think genuinely caring about, what did you just give somebody a weird look?
No, it's just you're talking about controversial stuff, and that's just now everybody's like, well, what kind of controversial opinions does he have?
Oh, well, you would just be surprised. Maybe that'll be a day to 4. The 4 things that'll get Charlie canceled. And that would be interesting. But no, I think it's the genuine care.
Yeah.
And so then you're just, it is what it is. What I don't like is the people that love to talk about themselves.
Yeah, for too long.
Yeah, and it's like, and it's like, all right, I get it. You love yourself, but I'm really good at making fun of them during it, and not in a way that's mean, and like, all right, that's enough of you, one of those kind of things, and it can come across kind of funny. But no, I think this has been incredible. What would you say? Unless there's another category that I'm missing. I know we've got other things, but I think this is I think we've helped our student and the parent that was looking for some advice.
Yeah.
And I think this was a great use of an episode. And I am incredibly impressed by your framework, which makes sense though, because you're in a space where your colleagues, people you work with, have to do this. And if they succeed, your company succeeds.
Yeah.
And so the care that you put into your employees obviously shows, and that's why this is there. When you do so much on your own, you just do it. And then all of a sudden everybody's like, well, how did you get this or that? And I'm like, I don't know. But the number one thing I can definitely say is just show up.
Yeah.
Just show up. Absolutely. If you're in the room, you're in the room. Yeah. And there's something to that. You cannot be, you can't be in the room if you're not in the room is basically a good way of saying it.
So a good way to think about that is like you're looking for people that also show up. And so maybe you won't know the very first time that you go to a show who that is, or show, event, whatever it is. But over time, you'll find them. So it took me. So I started working with NTC in 2017, and we didn't really start working together until 2021. Yeah. And so that's 4 years of working in the same environment, sure, by proxy, before we made a connection. Yep. And then since then, like our connection has turned into this. And so you don't know where networking is going to go or who you're going to meet and like exactly what their skill sets are because there's just too many people out there with too many different skills and whatnot. But I found you, you found me, we found Shauna. We're out there looking, and we're always going to find top tier folks.
Yeah, and I would always have the intention of finding people you can go have coffee with, because that, I can always pinpoint, like Shauna's a good example. I didn't know her very well, and so we just went to lunch. Yeah. And from that, she was teaching a class at Belmont, 3 months later. Once I found out she really wanted to do something like that.
Yeah, she's fancy.
Oh yeah, but I didn't know how fancy she was until I just went to lunch.
Yeah,
and I do a lot of lunches, a lot of coffees, because that's really how you can really get to know somebody. You can get to know somebody in 10 minutes at a networking event, but. So I always have that in thought, and I'm probably at 4 coffees a week. It seems like I'm always like, God darn, another coffee.
Sometimes mine goes up and down depending on my schedule. Like, so next week I've got a coffee or 2 coffees and a lunch. Yeah, but then like the past 2 weeks I haven't done hardly anything, just because that's the way it worked out. You've been
traveling. You've had one of those kind of things. I have months where like September and October. Every day is busy. But to go back to the networking thing, to get away from talk about coffee, you have a hard day at work and you're scheduled to go to an event at 6:00. It's free. You didn't have to pay any money to be there. You're not obligated by your company to go. It's very easy just to go home.
It is.
And so just show up. I went to a podcast, meetup.
Yeah, a couple weeks ago.
And, I was going, I just don't want to go. I'm tired. I was just tired. And I'm so glad I went.
Yeah.
So glad. But by just showing up, and, we got a podcast guest, Sherry Traxler, by going to a meetup.
Yeah.
And, so you just never know until you go. And so showing up, I think, is the most important part, and be genuine.
Yeah. I don't disagree with that. I think being unafraid to ask the question is probably a close second, but you're never going to be able to ask the question if you don't show up to begin with.
That's right.
So that's a good point.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Any other final thoughts?
If anybody is interested in more in-depth conversation, or like what we would consider like 201 level stuff instead of just entry level, feel free to let us know in the comments and whatnot on the YouTube's video for this. Because we definitely have more to talk about.
Yeah, and I think what I love about where our podcast has gone is we can empower anybody, but I think if you're new to the data and tech world, I think we're a pretty good podcast to be listening to, and I think this is a great example. This episode.
Yeah, we're not just a one-trick show, one-trick pony, whatever it is.
Yeah. You said it last time really bad when we were on somewhere. You said one pony trick or something. I don't know. No,
I think I messed up an idea whose time has come. Is inevitable thing. I'm not even getting it right now.
Yes. So with that, we better let everybody go. Yeah. So anything else?
If you see us out there and you've listened to this episode, come join our circle.
Aw, that's it for the Data for All podcast. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Hopefully this helps you out to get out there and do some more networking. If you like what you heard, we'd love for you to subscribe either on your favorite podcast player, or check us out on YouTube as well. But the easiest way to find us is by going to dataforall.io. That's data, the number 4, all.io. And for the Data for All podcast, I'm Charlie Apigian.
And I'm Charlie Yielding.
And until next time.